Video game sales suddenly died. Atari lost $80 million in one.
The
computer raters say they were inspired by the movie War Games.
And people were sick of computer graphic games.
Business has dropped in half over the past.
Sega Sg-1000.
Atari has nothing to lose.
It's the video game years, and say hello to 1983.
Shall we play a game?
The systems, the culture, the games. Star Wars finally hits the arcade.
I mean, you see it in an arcade, you just want to sit in it.
An animated game steals lots of quarters.
And then it's just like, and then you die, and it's like, what the?
And a big crash threatens it all.
Tons of systems, garbage games.
Plus a mouse who fights crime. And Mario gets a brother. So call up that weapons van and don't stop believing. Get ready for 1983.
Elevator action, I enjoy for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then it starts to get a little annoying.
So you're agent 17, and you're inside these high-rise buildings, and you're trying to steal these secret documents before exiting the bottom of the building in your little red sports car and getting away.
This is one of my favorite platformers, and it probably is that you just have this handgun with a really cool, shot effect. So it goes,
right.
And you can see the bullet. You can dodge the bullet.
Yeah, it's a very slow bullet.
It has probably the worst jump kick of any video game ever, which is interesting. You have the criminals you have to face. You can shoot them or jump kick them. The jump kick's sort of like ass and feet first.
You have to know which doors to get in and out of. You could duck, you could jump to avoid these slow-moving bullets.
The soundtrack is lauded, but it's just like a 15-second loop. Really, I don't think it's that good.
I like it. It gets into the theme of, I don't know, a spy espionage game, but it's
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking Spy Hunter.
But yeah, definitely better than Space Invaders. Ooh, take that. Space Invaders.
This is Starcade, TV's first video arcade game show.
Starcade really came into its own in 1983. What a fantastic show.
It was a really, really cool idea and probably the best video game show they ever made, and they did make some after it.
Starcade was a game show based on playing arcade games, some of which debuted on the show. The host would ask the two contestants 2 very simple questions about arcade games, and if they got them right, they could play each other to compete to get the highest score. Now that's what I call a game show, because it's a game show about games.
It respected the video games. It showed off new games, esoteric ones, and the popular ones. You go back and watch these episodes, you're seeing some games that I'm learning about these games watching this show. It's great.
You had, questions about arcade games, and then you would actually go and compete on these arcade games as well.
You could show on television that you were good at this game.
The consumer base for video games hadn't fallen into a niche yet.
Yeah.
There is young, there is old, there is male, there is female. Everyone is playing these games.
There's families playing together on some of these shows. Video games weren't pegged as, oh, it's just a kid thing. Anyone could play them. You had 50-year-olds on the show.
It was so popular, and then, it was not a lot like that for years to come, that they were replaying that on G4 in the last few years, and
One thing that I thought was pretty funny was that they got the whole audience to just go mad while people were playing the game. I mean, while nothing in particular is happening, like it's on a loading screen, nothing's happening, they're just going wild. It's not a sporting event. I mean, how do you cheer on someone playing Pac-Man? As you go, get those dots, eat them. You eat them up real good.
When you watch it, you get a sense that they really don't know how to capture what the heck they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just like awkward moments.
My favorite thing about Starcade was the final round and how much this show was actually based on skill, and they actually kind of took it seriously.
I mean, and you're fitting it within a certain time-allotted format. I mean, some of these games, if you really wanted to go for being the best at one of these games, it could take a long time. But I don't know, they squeezed in the format.
And it was actually video game knowledge. It wasn't knowledge that had nothing to do with video games, or it wasn't questions that had nothing to do with it, so you actually could learn about the games.
A pilot for the show featured Alex Trebek before he started hosting Jeopardy, but the first season's host was Mark Richards. He was eventually replaced by Jeff Edwards, but that was definitely for the best.
He was a fantastic host. Coming into the show, he's an older guy. He knew nothing about video games, but he was a quick study. He learned, and you can tell he actually enjoyed watching these games and talking about them. He wasn't just some guy they hired, said, oh, video games. No, he got into it. He liked interacting and learning about the games. He liked the kids on the show, seeing what they liked. You can tell he studied up.
There was a fascination that was very obvious that he had with what he was seeing, and that still goes back to video games being sort of new, and especially he was, if I remember correctly, an older guy at the time. Yeah. But, you know, I think he very much enjoyed his job, and that's part of what makes watching Starcade so much fun.
Love you, Jeff Edwards.
Tapper. Tapper was another really fun game that taught you how fun it is to serve alcohol to people.
Absolutely.
It's an early example of in-game branding. The original version was sponsored by Budweiser.
Sure.
And it was placed in bars, and there was even brass rail footrests and drink holders for it.
The side of the arcade cabinet looked like an actual bar. It even had like this corner edge that looked like it'd be like the corner of a bar.
And there was the controls, a joystick, and you pull the tap.
Right.
Beautiful arcade machine.
In the game, you worked as a bartender who was serving a mob of people coming into the bar actual glasses of beer.
It was a frustrating game because it seems like I could never keep up. You keep going around and trying to like stop everybody's like mugs from coming back.
Tapper always bothered me because of the working conditions in this bar. They've got one bartender for 4 or more bars, what is it?
Yeah.
And it's just one guy going back serving all the customers on 4 different bars.
As someone who bartended for 5 years, I can attest to the fact that the game accurately recreates the stress on a daily night of keeping drunk patrons happy.
The original version of Tapper featured the Budweiser logo, but later versions were turned into root beer Tapper. This was because there were so many minors in the arcades, and that was actually a good idea because marketing alcohol to minors is kind of a soda jerk move.
And the whole reason that happened was because they really believed that kids would be playing these games and get influenced by beer advertising.
Who doesn't like alcohol, especially when you're like 9 and 10 years old?
Yes, it's the perfect venue to serve alcohol.
Yeah.
In the arcade.
Isn't it obvious that kids would be influenced by playing Tapper? Of course you'd want to go grab a beer after playing that game. It's the same way why I want to eat spinach after playing Popeye.
That wasn't root beer. That was beer.
It was beer when I was playing it.
What's odd is that the people are still just as angry and anxious about getting root beer as they are actual alcohol.
They want that sarsaparilla.
Jumpman by Randy Glover.
So Epix and Commodore basically created Jumpman, and it was ported to a lot of the home computers at the time, the Atari 400, the Atari 800. It was later released for ColecoVision too.
What's neat about Jumpman is it's a platform game that originates on a home PC. You don't see a lot of platform games on home PCs. What you do see would be like arcade ports or something like that.
Randy Glover, the creator of Jumpman, said that Donkey Kong was the original inspiration for Jumpman.
Jumpman was inspired by the actions and the abilities that Mario could do in Donkey Kong.
Not only did it look and play like Donkey Kong, the game was called Jumpman.
It's interesting that the name of the character is Jumpman, since that was Mario's name originally in Donkey Kong.
Guess what the next game in the series was called? Jumpman Jr.
Is it really Mario's another adventure? We don't know.
You can't make this stuff up.
Sue them, Nintendo. Sue them. Sue them hard.
Jumpman is the poor man's Donkey Kong.
They swear it's coincidence. I mean,
well, Donkey Kong was the antagonist in Donkey Kong. They decided to use terrorists in space.
One of the main basic enemies isn't something that navigates the platforms or the ladders. They are basically smart missiles that just float and they come in from any side. And as soon as they line up with you, they zip towards you. So this is a very different type of enemy than most players are used to seeing in a platform game, and it definitely gives Jumpman a very unique feel.
Yeah, you defuse bombs in space on Jupiter, placed by Al-Qaeda. It was quite revolutionary of a game.
Hell, we put it in the intro of this show! That's how important Jumpman is.
Yes.
Congo Bongo is just a Donkey Kong ripoff from Sega.
Congo Bongo was basically Sega's answer to Donkey Kong.
Sega! Congo Bongoing it up.
It was a platform-style game, however, they made it a little bit more detailed and in a 3D perspective.
It was great on the ColecoVision. They really showed off the ColecoVision's power, or what it had.
It was almost like a pyramid, and you would kind of go left, up, right, down, but you'd be progressing up. And you know, it did have this kind of really cool sensation of depth that it gave the player as well.
Lots of people I'm sure love it. I look at it and my eyes invert and I don't know what I'm doing.
Your primary character was like this safari dude, little guy with a little safari hat.
And you have to reach, you know, your girl who's being held by a gorilla, kind of familiar concept.
No, his name is Bongo, it's different.
I think it was just a rip-off of Donkey Kong, you know, Congo Bongo, Donkey Kong.
ファミリーコンピュータの楽しいカセット情報
So while the US home console market was imploding, over in Japan, starting to rise.
The family computer in Japan was released in 1983, and this is the Nintendo, except it kind of looks more like a Fisher-Price toy.
So Nintendo had been doing very well with its arcade machines as well as the Game & Watch, but they really wanted to try and find a cartridge-based console that they could put into the homes of families, because those were becoming very popular.
If only there were a hero to save us from this pit of despair. A new kind of computer for the family. A family computer, if you will.
The Famicom did really well. It sold an awful lot in its first several months.
The controllers are a little bit more, they feel a little bit more dense than the NES version, but they are, you know, hardwired controllers, and they're very short cables.
The second controller had a mic built in so you could talk or sing into it. I'm just gonna chalk that up to being from the land of karaoke.
The Famicom had 3 games on release. 3. It was Popeye, Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong Jr.
It was a high quality system. You know, it had a lot of capabilities, and as we've learned over the years, the NES, they could really push some quality stuff through that system.
The Sega Sg-1000 came out the same day as the Famicom, so the bad blood between the two companies started right out of the gate.
This is the Model 2, came out in 1984. The graphics are equivalent to like ColecoVision, probably the best thing to compare it for.
This is not the Master System in the United States. The Master System was the Mark III.
The controller kind of looks like a walkie-talkie, and the vertical on the side of the controller buttons kind of make it look like the Intellivision controller, without looking like a telephone.
Why this SG-1000 didn't do very well is because the lack of third-party support. The third-party companies were supporting Nintendo and the Famicom at the time. So only a handful of games came out for the system.
Sega Sg-1000 does what Fama can't?
1983 saw the introduction of the MSX computer, which sold very well in Japan and Brazil and other countries, but didn't do well. In fact, didn't hardly ever sell in North America and UK.
It's arguable what MSX stands for. It was a standard similar to how, you know, IBM compatibles were a standard for us. Multiple companies like Sharp and Yamaha and Sony and other companies put out MSX computer systems.
You'll see a lot of similar titles from the Famicom also be on the MSX, because several times they came on the MSX first.
Some of these include Bomberman, R-Type, Contra.
Games like Castlevania that eventually appeared on it, Metal Gear. And so it was a big system there.
It might stand for Microsoft Extended Basic, because that's kind of how it was made, but I think it stands for sex.
Sex.
So this was an important year because this is literally the point where video games start to be dominated by Japan, and the US lost it forever after that. Never to return.
And now, it should have been a video game in 1983.
Oh, hello. I'm Eric, and here's the stuff from 1983 that should have been made into a video game. Scarface for the Atari 2600. Run away from a chainsaw-wielding psychopath that's trying to hack you up. It'd basically be just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, except you'd be running from the killer, you wouldn't actually be the killer. And also, it wouldn't be a turd. Risky Business for the Intellivision. Reenact Tom Cruise's famous underpants dance in this first ever dance simulator game, but don't miss a move, otherwise your parents are gonna walk in on you doing the skivvy shake. Metallica's Kill 'Em All. In this Robotron-esque game, you just search out stuff and just kill everything in sight. Seek and destroy! Something like that. Every Breath You Take by The Police. Stalker game. Reading Rainbow. The game. Not only would it be educational, but it would also be one of the funnest games you've ever played. But you don't have to take my word for it. Actually, it didn't exist, so you gotta take my word for it. It's fun and educational. It's fun-educational. It's fun-educational. And that's what should have been a video game in 1983. And I wanna play 'em.